I appreciate you carving out some time and being here for us today, man.
My pleasure, Steve.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you for a number of reasons. First of all, thanks so much for carving out the time. I know how busy you are, but when I think of sales, I mean, you've influenced me and a lot of my peers over the years exponentially, and I think it's the simple way that you break down the sales process. But what I want to talk to you about really is just kind of get a glimpse, because you have evolved into obviously this sales coach and trainer, author, speaker. But give me a rundown just a little bit about, the evolution there in terms of where you started and at what point you realized, you know what, I've got something here that I can teach.
I cold called in New York City for 3 years. I think that's all I have to tell anybody.
That gets the job done.
I began to write in 1992 and realized that that the people that were reading my stuff were anxious to get more. And that was really my incentive to continue. And I've been, writing now for 22 years, and I get it. I mean, I get the fact that I pay attention to the sales world and the salesperson. And I don't just talk about old bullshit ways of selling. I talk about why people buy. I talk about the opposite of, I'm a disruptive sales guy. And my disruption causes people to follow me literally to the sunset. Because I don't find the pain, I find the pleasure. I don't use customer satisfaction, I use customer loyalty. I don't close a sale, I create a relationship. And all of those things have to do with the new way of selling.
Yeah, so when you started, I guess, because for you have to sell, right? So when you transitioned, Jeffrey, how did you go about building that brand? Because, I mean, did you just have a built-in audience and you decided, okay,
no,
I'm going to...
I wrote and I appeared in business journals around the country, and my brand was developed as a result of my writing.
So how did you get that press? I mean, did you approach them? I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, I called the editors. I called the editors and said, hey, I'm sending you a couple of columns. If you like them, print them. And they did, and they did.
And off to the races it went. So were you just methodical, just like a sales process going after it?
No, I have no sales process.
No sales process.
We have a strategy.
So if you could, I guess, go back to when you started, right, with younger Jeffrey, is there anything that you felt like you tripped up on or you'd do differently, or was it?
Well, listen, I'm from Philadelphia. My parents were smart. Therefore, I have brains. How I chose to use them was my entree into the sales world and the writing world. If I would have been regardless of what I was, I would have been good at it. I just chose to be, in the media more than at a desk.
Yeah, and do you think, because your approach, right? I mean, I'm a content guy. I mean, I think that everyone kind of, at least on a high level, understands that the world has evolved from. I mean, you say it all the time, right? People don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. And so right. That being said, in every marketplace, you've got a bunch of people that all look the same, and then there's inevitably people that kind of rise above the fray. And it kind of, I guess, does everyone, from your experience, I guess, looking at where people are falling short, are people just not patient enough to share their expertise and position themselves, in a leadership type of a role where they're actually sharing knowledge without closing?
Steve, they don't have the balls. That's number one. Number two, they don't have an understanding that writing leads to wealth. Most of the people who are good at sales, if you ask them if they tweet, they'll say no.
Right.
What's that about? Or they have 19 followers, or they have 281 followers, or they have 432 connections on LinkedIn. I mean, they're not willing to play the game.
And what is that game now? When you say they're not willing to play the game, they're not willing to put in
the sales game, which all business is relatively a game.
Yeah,
is you have to be socially known. You have to have a social reputation. You have to have you have to have an ability for somebody to Google you and find something positive, find something valuable. Find something that would make the other person want to engage with you, want to connect with you, want to ultimately meet with you or buy from you.
Yeah. So, when you look out there, do you think it's people aren't in jobs that they love or they're passionate about, or they just don't want to put in the time to share their expertise, a mixture of both?
The answer is both.
Yeah.
Some people don't like their job but have expertise. Some people love their job but don't have expertise. There's all kinds of permutations for that. But the bottom line is no one puts it all together. And I just was fortunate enough or smart enough or insightful enough to have put it together in 1992 before the internet. And then when the internet came out, I jumped on it.
Yeah.
And when social media came out, I jumped on that too. So if somebody looks at my YouTube channel and sees that I've got 3.5 or 4 million views on my YouTube channel, they go, "Oh man," and they're discouraged when they don't realize that I started with one.
Right. And I think that's the thing, right? Is people, they look at guys like you, or they look at anybody successful in the market, and it is that, because I run into a lot of great people that just, I don't know if it's impatience, that are, if you actually talk to them, they really know their stuff, but no one else knows they know their stuff. And so if someone is starting out, they're trying to build their brand, they're trying to build sales recognition and value, right? And you have this thing, I give value first, which is brilliant. I'm just trying to figure out, like, where would you start? Just start writing, because people are thinking, okay, that's great. Jeffrey's got millions of viewers.
Listen, Steve, when I started to write, I had to be in print. I had to be in a newspaper. Newspapers right now are insignificant other than a half a dozen. Any news that I want to get, I don't have to wait for a newspaper to be printed. I can find out in 5 seconds online. How's your Yellow Pages doing? Huh? So once something's printed, it's old. Time magazine is going to be the next one to go digital. Newsweek's already dead. So I'm looking at this from the perspective of if you're going to do something of value or valuable, there has to be something that can go online almost instantaneously. And most people decide not to do it. Look at the newspapers. They thought that the internet was a joke. How are they doing right now? Yeah, how's that Herald Tribune doing?
Yeah, it's not what it used to be. You could buy one, but you'll go through it in about a minute and realize you already know everything in there.
Right. Exactly right.
So when you're out there talking to people, because everyone's talking to you about sales, right? And so is sales evolved into simply sharing knowledge, and the byproduct of that is people coming to you as the expert?
People make their own choices in what they want to do and where they want to grow. My experience came by having people tell me yes and people telling me no. And you learn from both. And when you learn in New York City, you've learned twice as fast as anybody else on the planet. The expression, the New York Minute, that's about 42 seconds. So I had to make decisions instantly, and I had to make them fearlessly. And most people are afraid to decide quickly.
So take me back. When you were doing that, you're doing sales calls in New York City, right? So if you had to do that again, same approach, different, like how do you approach that situation differently?
Well, let me just put it this way. When I was in New York City, I had to do things quickly. Otherwise, someone would be in front of me. I wanted to stay in front of them. That's number one. Number two, now that I have a developed expertise and an online presence and 12 books to my name, I can take a little bit more time because I don't want to do anything that is irrationally decided. Like when you're in New York City, you decide irrationally, and sometimes you make mistakes. So I don't want to make mistakes now. So I'll give it a little bit more time to be able to decide and think it out. If people want my advice, it's no problem. I sell it online.
Yeah, well, let me ask you though, okay, because that's a good point, right? Now you have options and patience.
I don't have the time to coach people individually unless they really want to pay a lot of money, and some do. By the way, I have individual people that I coach; they pay a ton.
Right. And that's something that you've built, right? That's brand equity. That's, the Gitomer brand.
Well,
I mean,
because I wrote the Little Red Book of Selling and the other guy didn't.
so is that really it? Just, because what I'm trying to think of is if you take yourself back without that brand equity, right? If you take, Jeffrey Gitomer and you had to go out back in the day without that brand equity, do you approach it the same way?
I don't know. I tell people to start out by writing. And, now you can write and be more powerful than the New York Times with your blog. When I started to write, either I was in print with a 10,000 people circulation or I was dead.
Right. And is that what you see, like the guys that you coach? I mean, does it start from, because writing is basically putting your knowledge out there, right? I mean, is that basically the baseline now for everybody that's an expert? Start by just getting your intellectual equity out to the masses? You know what I mean? Because there's people that are good salespeople that aren't, necessarily gifted writers or have a face for radio, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm trying to figure out is...
Hey, I don't buy that shit. I have a book. It's called Every Great Chess Player Was Once a Beginner. Think about that title. If a guy says he can't write, what he's saying is, I refuse to learn how to write. If a guy doesn't tweet, he's saying, I refuse to learn how to tweet. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff when I started. I wasn't a seasoned writer when I started. I read my first columns a couple of months ago. They sucked. But I got good at it. Yeah. And I got smart at it. And I had a person who edited my column for 3 years, and I made her give me all of the edits so I could learn how to write from an editor's perspective. Most people won't take the time. They're too busy watching some stupid-ass rerun on television like a fool, or the news, worse.
You don't mince words.
Nope.
So
well, listen, hopefully, some people will be listening to me and they won't like it. And I don't care. But there'll be a dozen people listening to this and it'll change their lives forever for the better. And I have thousands of emails to prove it. Thousands from people that I have changed their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's refreshing. And I remember I saw you speak years ago outside of Chicago, and that was the first time I'd engaged with you. And that's kind of what, instantly, it was just kind of like, I don't know how to compare it, but it's almost like magazines where you see, I mean, how many times can they tell you to get off your ass and walk a little bit to get in shape, right? And you always kind of approach it just like you are today. Everyone wants to know, how do I make more sales and get better? And just like you said, it's almost like, well, quit asking and go do something. And so, when people are listening to this, they're going to think, great, Jeffrey wants me to go do something. What do I do? Is it, I mean, the response to that, like when someone is struggling, is it just, look, if you want to get good at it, go get good at it?
Yeah. Study it. Study it, practice at it, go get kicked in the face a few times. I've been kicked in the face plenty of times.
Yeah. And so, I guess when you were building the brand, because I mean, do you sit back now that you are who you are and you are where you are? I mean, did you expect that?
No, but as it evolved, I knew it was coming. As it evolved, I knew it was coming.
I mean, would you have... So your message, your attitude, your personality, you haven't changed a bit?
I may have gotten a little more mellow now that I live in the South. You know what I mean?
You were a little more brash back then?
Well, in Charlotte, when people wave at you, they use all their fingers. So, having grown up in Philly and New Jersey and New York and cut my teeth there, it's a little bit more impatient.
Yeah.
And you have to be forceful. And, I teach being assertive, but in New York City, you need to be aggressive.
I mean, at what point did you know that it was, because it's interesting, right? I think a lot of people, the ride that you've had, even from when I saw you talk, I mean, it was like, I think you had just come out with the Little Red Book of Selling, mm-hmm. and then it was like kaboom, so obviously, did you, as you were progressing, let's talk about just how you got into, the speaking, because you're selling yourself. Initially, you didn't have this big brand, right? No one does. I mean, were you reaching out to, chambers and anyone that would hear you talk and saying, look, I've got this
I
message?
would talk anywhere for free. And I
Anywhere
would
for
talk
free.
about diverse subjects. I would talk about networking. I would talk about attitude. I would talk about sales. I would talk about customer service. I would talk about customer loyalty. I would talk about all the elements that I write about. And that gave me the experience and the understanding to say, hey, I have a depth of knowledge. Let me begin to put this out there.
So initially, was it to drive people to your writing?
There was no website.
Right.
It was to drive people to the local business journal in 92. And it wasn't until really 96 or 97, 5 years later, that I could drive them to a book or a website.
Yeah. And then like eventually, I mean, how long did it take you before you realized, well, man,
The Sales Bible eventually hit the marketplace in late 94. So let's call it 1995. The Customer Loyalty book came out in 1998. So between 98 and now is when I made my mark. The Red Book didn't come out until 2008.
did you have, everyone talks
Actually,
about,
that's not true. It came out in 2004.
got it. So did you have, everyone talks about Simon Sinek and these things about the why. And, I think a lot of internet marketers are I mean, there's so much fluff out there. And so, for you, as you were progressing through this whole evolution of Gitomer, right? I mean, you're kind of out there talking, you've got this brand, you're growing. Is there anything that you see guys doing where you're just shaking your head like, oh my God, you sales folks are just lost in the abyss?
Yes, but I don't verbalize it. I don't want to say, my competitors are not spoken about by me in a public forum under any circumstances.
Got it.
I may not agree with their philosophy or their strategies, but my mom taught me you don't say something bad about somebody. If you have nothing nice to say, you say nothing. And but I'm a person whose sales integrity and whose sales wisdom flies in the face of conventional wisdom. And I used the word disruptive way before disruptive became a buzzword.
No, and I think that's what makes you different. And I mean, do you have like everyone talks about this why, right? Do you do business and grow the brand because you just love what you do, or is there some deeper?
No, well, obviously I wanted to be successful at it, but
Sure.
I love what I do, and I wanted that to show. You can't tell I love what I do. That's crazy.
Right. So, I mean, you love what you do, but do you have that? It's just something that you do, like you just love what you do, or do you have like this deeper underlying passion to see other people succeed, or is it just I've got this knowledge base, I've got this message, and I love it, and I'm gonna push this thing till till the end? I mean, is there that magical why?
I don't push it. I don't push it. I put it out there, and then people pull it.
Love it.
I mean, I've given more than 2,000 speeches in the last 20 years, and I've never made a phone call to sell a speech. Never made one sales phone call to sell a talk. People call up and read my stuff, and they like it, and they call up and want to buy.
Man, that's incredible. So did you have any, you just don't strike me as a guy that's, you just look driven, like you know what you want and you go get it. But did you receive, as you were growing your brand or saying things, I mean, was there any bit of advice or wisdom along the way? I know you've told the story about, doing t-shirts to the Olympics. Was there any like aha moment where you were like, okay, that bit of advice or that scenario resonated with me, and when you look back, it kind of created who you are?
No, there wasn't one thing. It was a series of things that happened over time that built one on top of the other. But when I opened up the box of books from China with the little red book of selling in it, I started to cry, because I knew at that moment, that was a deciding moment for me that said, you have a brand now, expand on this.
Yeah, that's got to be just absolutely incredible. The whole concept of I give value first, right? If you're a sales manager or you're working on a sales team, is it the same formula, like in terms of building a personal brand? Like if you're working at a company, someone's working at a company, is it still the same formula? I mean, what's the, if you were about
There's no formula, Steve, there's no formula. All it is it's an ability to think about what the other guy needs and focus on that. Does the guy want to buy my copier or does he want office productivity? Does the guy want to buy my life insurance policy or does he want peace of mind for his family? Does the guy want to buy my burglar alarm or does he want to know where burglars are likely to break in so that I can help him prevent that? Now, give your customers what they need.
Right.
Let your customers win. Let your customers feel great, not find their pain bullshit.
Right. So let me ask you.
You know what? That was valid in 1972. It's no longer valid, nor is it valuable, and it pisses me off. It's no longer qualify the buyer. Why do I want to qualify a buyer? I just want to like the buyer, and maybe he'll like me back.
It's just that easy.
Yep.
Love it. So let me ask you. You have to look back, and this has been a crazy ride for you. I mean, anyone. I mean, you've had just an awesome career, man. But when you do look back, do you have something where, I mean, how do you hope that you will have made your mark?
No, probably by writing. I don't push it to anybody, but people find it and like it and send it to other people. It's not about tweeting, it's about retweeting. When someone retweets you, that means your stuff was valuable enough for them to want to share with all of their base.
Yeah, I mean, does that what drives you though? You know what I mean? Like, is it enough to have a great message and
No, I have 4 daughters. That's what drives me.
Well, I've got 2, so I'm right behind you.
But listen, I'm just going to say it this way. I think that you need to put yourself in a position where, as a salesperson, that you build your brand that feels valuable to somebody else. And it's not about your sales pitch or your slides from marketing, your slide deck or your sales quota. It's not about it. That's all bullshit. What they need to do is feel who you are as a person and feel that, and feel the customer needs to feel that they can win by doing business with you.